Queensland's first game of the season, and the Firebirds were off the ball early. Hunter, meanwhile, burst down to the blocks, taking control from the outset. The home side began finding their feet, but the Hunter Jaegers weren't about to relinquish their lead. As was Lara Wellham. In fact, she didn't miss all night, shooting 14 from 14 attempts in her 3 quarters on court. A 6-goal half-time lead ballooned in the third term as the attack continued. And coupled with watertight defence, a Queensland comeback didn't stand a chance. Alison Tucker's last line of defence almost wall-like. With depth on the bench, the Jaegers made it successive wins and proving they'll be real dangers once again this season.
The Horse Festival Ball marks the halfway point of the 2-week event, a night for equine types, politicians, basically anyone out for a good time. Despite a night of celebration, committee member Jim Callanan looked especially proud at today's street parade, recognised for his work in equine circles with the Horse Festival's VIP title.
It's a complete honour to join the other ladies and gentlemen that have been the past VIPs over the last 25 years.
As for future contenders, there were plenty, even if, in this case, the horse was on the jockey. Shadowed by the Great Divide, the street parade brings the upper hunter together, from the seasoned horsemen to school kids. And it seems most of Scone and everyone else turned out for the parade. Under a grey sky, there was some colour, and there's bound to be plenty more come Friday for the running of the Scone Cup, a popular event on the racing calendar. A word of warning, however, make sure you have some good boots. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Yeah, you're looking at the elderly and those that are sick to be certainly the priority.
Curry-raised John Sattler went on to score legendary status in rugby league after famously playing a grand final despite breaking his jaw. Unable to attend today's ceremony, the former South Sydney and Australian captain would have been in good company. 4 soccer players were inducted, including former Matilda Shelley Yeoman, who played some 24 games for Australia. While 2 stars of speedway motorcycle racing were also honoured, with 89-year-old Vic Duggan, overcoming illness, to attend and be recognised for his riding efforts both in Australia and overseas that included countless titles. Only recently retired from the track, Todd Wiltshire was another from Speedway to be named today. With this, the 14th such induction to the Hunter Hall of Fame, the tally now sits at 222 in total. An Australian hockey star post-World War II, Joan Walter rounded out today's group, highlighting once again the rich collection of sporting talent that's produced in the Hunter.
It was a basic beginning to an extraordinary project. A $500,000 playground for children in wheelchairs will be built at Spears Point Park. Lake Macquarie Council and the Variety Club kicked in the money, but they now face another challenge.
The Bash is our major fundraiser for the year, and as you can see, there's just some very eccentric people around here. They're like crazed animals being let out of a cage.
We've got Friar Tuck and the Nun here. Is there going to be any funny business away on the trip?
Absolutely not. She's told me she's got no more bad habits. This is the last one.
The Humble HR was the first car out of the blocks, beginning a road trip covering almost 2,500 kilometres. And it's an ambitious adventure, given some cars are older than the people driving them.
64 old, mate, no trouble here.
If there was, though, Greg Lynch is the man who picks up the pieces, and after 16 years, he's since been inducted into the Variety Club's Hall of Fame.
If someone's stranded, we arrange accommodation, meals, whatever has to be done to keep the team together. That's my job.
Next stop, Moree. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Starting second on the grid, there was no doubting Stoner had the pace, but with limited preparation for bike setup, it was holding that speed throughout the 26 laps that was always going to be the issue. Coming off 2 wins in a row, he had the chance to become the first Australian to score 3 straight wins in the class, and when he took the lead, it looked a real possibility. Steve Janker was probably glad he didn't see this coming, the German lucky to get away without more serious damage. Chased down by the lead pack, Stoner fell back to 4th over the closing stages. Denny Pedrosa winning in a thrilling finish, but Stoner was still thumbs up after picking up points to be 3rd overall and only 10 behind the Spaniard in the race for the Riders' Championship.
You'd hardly think Newcastle would have suffered too many problems in their first outing of the Divisional Championships. A 72-point thrashing of Northern Rivers was nothing more than a training run in the end, but more will be known tonight at Team Medicals. They faced the Central Coast this weekend, where a win would all but secure a home ground grand final the following week against the Southern Zone winner. There were a few sore heads to come out of the club game at Wyong between the Roos and Lakes United. Dane Cronin and Craig Martini, each spending time in the sin bin after the blue. Lakes stole the lead early in the second half as Wyong pressed for points. But the Roos came storming home late to win, but they'll be sweating on the playing future of captain Troy Pizzette after he was cited for a high tackle. In Group 21 Rugby League, Scone got the better of Muswellbrook in a replay of last year's grand final, while Aberdeen beat Singleton 38-24. And in rugby, the country Cockatoos have made it 2 from 2 in the Australian Shield, beating Melbourne 37-18.
Jan Polglaze is hoping the next fortnight will finally give her the answers that a 1998 inquest was unable to. That is, to identify the vehicle and the driver that hit and subsequently killed her son, Timothy Chapman, on Rodney Road, Mount Vincent, between 9:20 and 9:40 p.m. on December 20, 1997. Timothy was waiting to rendezvous with his sister and take her to a campsite where he was staying with 2 mates. Despite Jan's repeated public appeals to locate the vehicle and driver responsible, no one has ever been charged. State Coroner John Abernathy is re-examining the case after representations from the family and work by the Newcastle University Legal Centre. Coroner Abernethy was today told that the initial police investigation lacked content, that not enough emphasis was placed on identifying the vehicle involved, and more effort should have been made to get information from witnesses. Counsel assisting the coroner, Paul Lakatos, added at this stage there was no evidence about the vehicle nor the driver, and unless there was public interest or oral evidence, the questions could remain unanswered.
Although Coroner John Abernethy will have plenty of information to assist his work over the next 2 weeks. While the first inquest had just 8 witness statements, the re-investigation has a total of 60 records of interview or witness statements, plus more scientific information to assist the inquiry.
Coroner Abernethy begins taking evidence tomorrow morning. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's a case of going from bad to worse, according to Councillor Rob O'Brien. He says the current Visitor Information Centre just off the highway at Blacksmiths is not visible enough and simply doesn't provide adequate information or services.
Well, the current information centre is a bit sad, and I believe it's about time we got a nice, decent one that really does show off the city and all its attributes.
It's been proposed that the Visitor Information share a new council-owned building with the Library and Community Centre in the Swansea CBD. It's a move Councillor O'Brien says would make Lake Macquarie's tourist information services even worse.
People coming through the roundabout, I think, will have extreme difficulty, first of all, even knowing there's a tourist office there, let alone actually stopping. I believe parking will be a huge problem there next to Coles.
Tonight, Councillor O'Brien will be making an ambitious proposal to Council calling for a new standalone Visitor Information Centre to be built on the waterfront opposite the current location at Blacksmiths.
Well, the freestanding building could encompass a cafe, nice clean toilets, children's play area, an area for land care, and even an area where people can sell local produce.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. A rare outdoor recovery session for Newcastle, and given their luck of late, the weather just about summed things up. It was all smiles for Steve Simpson soon after though, after getting the call he never expected. Meant to be babysitting his daughter for the day, the big back rower was instead rushing to reach Sydney and another Blues jumper.
Let's be fair, did you honestly give yourself a realistic chance this morning?
No, mate, never even crossed my mind.
David Siege had all sorts of things going through his head when his reconstructed knee buckled in this tackle against the Tigers. Much better signs today though, up and walking, but with further tests ahead.
Might just need another little after scrape to get it cleaned up a bit, so worst case scenario, probably miss the Dragons and then be right.
It was a game when Newcastle certainly had their chances to score their first win of the season. Debutant Milton Thaiday scoring, while teenage 5'8" Jared Mullen impressed in his first outing after a week on the sickbed.
I thought it was going to be a lot slower than what it was. The quickness, I was buggered the whole game. You can't stop running.
He goes into state under-19s camp on Friday, which is to be coached by Knights assistant Craig Miller. Until then, he'll look after Newcastle, while Michael Hagan begins his Queensland Origin commitments.
Around 45 of Boeing Australia's Newcastle-based trade staff today picketed outside the Williamtown base, making their demands very clear.
Equal rights and equal pay for the same job, better working conditions and just a fairer payment system.
These men are maintenance workers on the RAAF's F-18 Hornet jet fighters, and they're threatening to strike over what they say is Boeing's refusal to negotiate a union work agreement.
A multinational company that's with that size can sit back and negotiate on an individual basis with an employee, and that's supposed to be a level playing field with all the resources that are available to them. We're just saying that's totally incorrect.
While Boeing says it will come to the party on some demands, a collective agreement will not be one of them.
It doesn't enable us to reward performance and attract staff and retain them. We're really looking for the current arrangement that we have.
The employees will return to work tomorrow, but there are plans for further stoppages next week. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Carrington Grain Terminal operator GrainCorp is one that may benefit from Commonwealth control of planning and regulation for port infrastructure. The company has told the Prime Minister's Infrastructure Task Force residential encroachment is delaying construction of improved rail handling facilities. While residents want the terminal out, GrainCorp may reconsider further investment, forcing up costs for farmers and reducing Australia's export performance. Port Waratah Coal Service is also eager to expand from its current 89 million tonne capacity to 120 million tonnes. It believes Transport Minister John Anderson's idea of having all players in the export supply network participating in infrastructure development is a step in the right direction, given the success of the Hunters mine-to-port coal chain.
And if you take that to the next level, to the macro level, I think that can only be good for Australia and its exports.
However, the Maritime Union argues no changes are needed in Newcastle.
It operates in a very cooperative manner. The unions are involved with the port users. We're working very closely together towards lifting productivity and making sure that the export dollars are earned for the country.
The state government will learn more about the Commonwealth's plan in a fortnight. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Negotiations are underway to determine which parts of Stockton Bight will be turned into National Park, Regional Park and Conservation Area. It's business as usual on the Bight, including four-wheel drive access for at least 12 months, after which the Port Stephens Council relinquishes its control and hands over management to a new Board of National Parks and Aboriginal representatives. Today, members of the Warramai Land Council and NPWS toured the Bight, considering its mixed uses, cultural and commercial values, and drafting boundaries between public and preservation zones.
Today was just very much about all the parties, particularly Aboriginal community members who haven't been here before, getting a good look at the Bight and understanding what it is we're negotiating over.
When negotiations are complete and the state government leases the land from the traditional Indigenous owners, access may become more restricted to certain areas.
It may seem like an unusual treatment for severe bouts of dizziness or poor balance, but postgraduate student Sue Reid has proved that physiotherapy can provide fast relief. Results from a 3-month study with 34 volunteers show that a simple physio technique involving joint movement and neck exercises is the answer.
We had really good results. The treatment group, the physio treatment group, had significantly better decrease in their pain, decrease in their dizziness and decrease in the amount of disability or effect it had on their life.
And the impact of cervical spine dizziness on people's lives can be significant.
They weren't able to leave the house unless they had someone with them. They wouldn't go shopping, they couldn't drive a car, and they certainly couldn't work anymore. So it does have a big impact.
While it is a relatively unknown condition, around 30% of people aged over 65 have neck-related dizziness, and most whiplash victims also suffer from it.
Cervical spine dizziness is dizziness from a dysfunction in the upper cervical spine, and the symptoms are dizziness, which is more an imbalance or loss of balance, and neck pain and a headache.
Sue hopes to present her findings to an international physiotherapy conference in Brisbane. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The footy-loving folks down at St George and in the Illawarra will remember Craig Smith doing plenty of this, while the big front rower even did a bit of this on special occasions during his memorable 7 years in the famous red and white. With a stint in England before an unexpected return to the NRL, Smith is now relishing an opportunity he never thought likely, running on against the Dragons.
It will be, and I wasn't expecting to have a run against them at any stage of my career.
But Smith won't come up against many familiar faces on Saturday. With 5 players on Origin duty, St George Illawarra has named a young side teeming with talent and size. The club's freshest crop of front rowers were mostly schoolboys when Smith was a Dragon, but they know plenty about the tough old prop.
Yeah, he's a quality player, so hopefully the young bucks can stand up to him and put him over.
It'll test both me and Justin. I remember watching him when I was in school and that, and I always liked him, so it's a good experience coming up against a bloke like that.
Smith would love to get a few good shots on old teammates like Sean Timmins or Lance Thompson, but there's something he'd enjoy even more, a maiden win in the blue and red.
It's always good to come up against friends. It makes the challenge a little bit more personal, I suppose. Look, we'll just be happy with 2 points and leave the personal battles out there, I think.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. As a week's worth of wet weather made way for some blue sky this morning, riders for this weekend's National Championship tested the surface the only way they know how. Only about half of the waterlogged Barley Ranch course was rideable today, but local hope Denny Ham was happy to attack the track at a more leisurely pace. Come Sunday, there's no doubt the Thornton motocross star will get his riding suit muddy. With 4 rounds remaining, Ham is sitting 4th in the Pro Open Championship behind 3 Kiwis.
It's been the level over the last few years to try and catch them, and we're slowly getting there. Craig Anderson unfortunately hurt this weekend, but he was leading the championship early.
Ham was just out of the places in the corresponding race last year. This time around, he's confident of a top 3 finish.
This is the home race and always seem to bring out my best at my home races, so looking to try and get a podium this weekend.
As the skies again turned ominous today, organisers promised the track, which is built on a rock shelf, would be ready.
It'll go ahead even if it's in rain.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Jazz and Gypsy are your typical fun-loving dogs. Or are they? Most dogs love to play ball, but Jazz seems, well, a little obsessed. Robert Stabler is an animal behaviourist who's studied hundreds of problem pets. A fixation on a tennis ball doesn't necessarily mean a problem, but excessive pacing, tail chasing or grooming can be indicators of obsessive-compulsive disorder.
So they can certainly occupy up to 50% of their day, so it means that they just keep doing it, and that's when you know that it's actually an abnormal behaviour.
Dr Stabler's found around 3% of pets suffer from the disorder. Most can be helped with behavioural therapy, but more and more of our much-loved pooches and moggies are so stressed out they need drugs.
Prozac or clomipramine that actually helps to balance the brain chemicals again, get it back into a situation where the animal is not quite as reactive.
Just like us, pets feel the pressures of the modern world. They're not really crazy, just a little unwell.
It's really getting back to spending time with our animals, setting them some standards that we think are reasonable, using drugs if we have to, and enriching their environment.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
Oh, what a ride. Kelly Slater held his nerve to pull off a perfect 10-point ride, not once but twice in superb 3-metre waves. It was a feat his fellow finalists couldn't match, the former 6-time world champion describing his win as magical.
I wasn't expecting to get two tens, but I knew it was possible out there and somebody could do it, and the waves just came to me. It was all about the waves coming to you and you riding them right.
Left to watch Slater rewrite the history books, there was heartbreak for runner-up Damien Hobgood. Succumbing to injury for the second year in a row at Taupo, Hobgood was left with a dislocated shoulder, but not before the judges gave him 10 for this ride. The Aussies had their go as well, but couldn't quite match the Americans, and even before the final round, Taj Burrow felt like he'd already won.
Even a couple of barrels I got 7s and 8s for, 6s, anything, even a 6. It was so much fun, like the best perfect barrel.
Sydney's Nathan Hedge was also among the final 4, going on to share equal third with Burrow. Hedge fell victim to the notorious reef break last year. No such dramas this time around.
Happy to be in one piece and my shoulder's all good.
For a century and a quarter, Royal New South Wales has overseen the running of the sport in the state. Tomorrow, all that history will be celebrated in Newcastle. Given the strong connections that railway workers have enjoyed with bowls, several of them will crew the famed 3801 steam locomotive, which will draw 10 packed carriages of lawn bowlers for one big birthday party.
It's a bowling show, 4 bowlers by bowlers. Many out returns of the day, you know.
While ecstatic to be hosting the party, it will be with a touch of sadness, as Wickham's Morrow Park Club will close its doors for good next week, highlighting the plight of all clubs in the region.
We're still fighting. We have several clubs that are showing pretty hard times with poker machine taxes and a drop in bowlers and the number of bowlers. It's pretty difficult for club life at the moment.
Originally, the celebration was to be held at the region's founding club, Newcastle City, but storm damage put an end to that. Now to be held at the Newcastle Jockey Club, the party is hoped to also remind policymakers of the pressures the taxes are having on registered clubs.
We're going to be around another 125 years, there's no doubt about that. The bowlers of Newcastle will see to that.
The sign says it all. This parcel of land's proximity to the Pacific Highway, airport and harbour translates into millions of dollars worth of investment, and the new owners got it relatively cheap, paying $6.3 million.
It was acquired from the Port Stephens Council for development as an industrial estate with a DA approval in place.
It's 20 hectares of land, divided into 49 lots and priced between $220,000 and $500,000 each.
Falls within the Tomago Aluminium Buffer Zone, which precludes all residential and rural activity, which is a big plus if you're wanting to run 2 shifts or 3 shifts out of your business.
We're looking at a 49-lot subdivision, just work on 10 people per factory. There's at least 500 people employed.
9 blocks have already been sold, but the selling agent won't as yet reveal the company names. He did say, however, the land is an attractive option for transport firms.
It actually falls outside of a metropolitan area, which if you're running major vehicles, major transport vehicles, you could qualify for an 18.5% litre fuel diesel rebate.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
This is no ordinary exercise class. The participants are mostly stroke victims who meet once a week for a couple of hours of physical and mental activity. The aim to teach skills they've lost since their stroke, including speech and fine motor skills, mainly through counting and memory games.
Things like noughts and crosses. The board we've got's got little holes in it, so what it actually does, they have to use fine motor skills to put the noughts and crosses in the board.
It's also an opportunity for stroke patients to mix with other people who share and understand their disabilities.
The socialisation is probably as important because a lot of stroke people can get marginalised, particularly ones that are suffering from aphasia, where they have speech impediment.
And there's plenty of success stories among them, staying active and alert the key.
And we've been going for about 4 months, and we've got 2 clients here that you wouldn't believe. If you'd have photographed them 4 months ago, even the walk on one of them, you can see a dramatic change.
Ada swears by the Stroke Recovery Club. She's blossomed with the added confidence and companionship.
Well, I think it exercises both the brain and the body, and that helps a lot, believe me.
For information regarding stroke prevention and recovery, contact the National Stroke Foundation's hotline. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
In a world that's saturated by fad diets and lists of do's and don'ts, it can be confusing working out exactly what to eat and how much. It's these questions that have led to the development of a program and this device which guides how much you put on your plate.
Trent, just looking at this looks like a bit of a man's meal. What's wrong with that opposed to what you've got here?
Right, yeah, so what we've got here, we've applied the template to this meal, and we've got 1/4 of the plate meat, 1/4 of the plate carbohydrate, and the rest of the plate is either your salad or your vegetable.
Here is an example of what a 55-kilogram woman would need to eat in a day to sustain her weight, but the program is modified to suit any adult.
To balance out the energy, in the booklets we've got calculators that you can have a look at your age and your weight and your gender, and you find out how many extras that you need.
Those extras can include anything from another serve of pasta to beer and chocolate. Dr. Claire Collins from the University of Newcastle School of Health says the system isn't just another fad diet, but instead incorporates the right amount of everyday foods.
Behind the scenes, we've put a lot of effort to make sure the template meets the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, the dietary guidelines, and meet the requirements for nutrients. And we're finding that people are losing, in a typical 8-week period, about 4 kilos.
The idea will be launched at the National Dietitians Association conference in Perth on Thursday. Colleen West, NBN News.
When it comes to big winners from the 2005 state budget, Broadmeadow-based train manufacturer United Gunninan leads the way with its 3 City Rail contracts worth $340 million about to pick up pace.
New projects include the $268 million being spent over the next 3 years to buy 81 new outer suburban rail carriages, 59 on the first tranche of our outer suburban cars, $21 million on the Hunter Fleet rail cars.
The Newcastle Health Strategy gets a $67 million shot in the arm, with over $37 million being spent in the next 12 months on the new Bone, Joint and Ambulatory Care Centre at John Hunter Hospital. Another $14 million goes to the redevelopment of radiation oncology and the establishment of mental health services at the Mater, while another $14 million allows the duplication of Five Islands Road between Spears Point and Boorrigal to gather momentum. Several schools will be celebrating tonight, including Bulladoola, with its central school to receive a long-awaited overhaul.
Major upgrades will commence at Ulladulla, Dubbo, Bulladoola, Concord West, Raymond Terrace.
And farmers battling drought were also on Andrew Refshawgie's mind.
Since the drought, the Carr Labor government has committed more than $160 million in drought support measures. And that support will continue as long as the drought continues itself.
The budget drew the approval of the Lower Hunters Labor MPs, who all shook hands with the Treasurer after the announcement. Gary Blair, NBN News.
These kids have been shopping, hunting for careers which will hopefully set them up for life.
The Defence Force and Air Force and engineering.
And when you're out to find your niche, there's questions that need asking.
What sort of training do I have to do? Can I go straight from school, or do I need to go through a training course first?
And of course, how much money can you earn? Questions any teenager goes through when pondering life after school.
Aquaculture and fish farming and that. Got a few pamphlets and had a chat to a few of the people.
For the exhibitors at today's careers market in Maitland, some hands-on work was popular, from beauty and makeup to a different sort of maintenance.
Where do we go to learn about basically driving them? And then the next question I've got is, how do we repair them?
Questions Kira Dodds once asked. The Cessnock High student and diesel mechanic trainee was this time behind the desk, now working in an industry screaming out for skilled labour.
I'm trying to encourage people, and just saying that anything's possible. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or anything's possible.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It must be one of the most free-flowing styles of the game, and they're only teenagers. That's not to say defence isn't a big hit at these carnivals either. Split into two teams this year, Sydney Gold still packs plenty of punch, but they had to withstand a fast-finishing Southern in their open encounter today. It was Danny Lawrence who got the ball rolling for Sydney Red in their match against the President's 13. Made up of fringe players or those who missed original selection matches due to injury, the President's 13 have extra reason to impress, and their reply would certainly have made selectors sit up and take note. Hunter Sports High's Tim Holman finishing off this first tackle raid that began deep inside their own half. Luke Latelli and Blake Ashford combined on the short side to great effect, with the hooker finishing off what he started. While Mark Russell was having a great day with the hands, sending Chase Stanley over to level things once again at half-time. Matthew Hall's ball, a minute after the break, soon had the scoreboard seeing more red. Before things turned again, a bomb bringing the points, with Coffs Harbour's Dennis Gordon diving over. A Reds try under the sticks broke the back of any comeback, but left selectors with a lot to think about.
It's a sight and sound from another era. Historic locos, the 3801 and 3830, starting the nostalgic journey for hundreds of bowlers. 550 of them made the trip from Sydney to today's party in Newcastle. The State's Bowls Association is the oldest in the world, but it is moving with the times, today introducing the sport to some young recruits. The makeshift green at the Jockey Club wasn't at all kind, but, as they say, practice makes perfect. These particular bowls have seen plenty of action.
They're my grandfather's bowls, and he won them in 1892.
It's this kind of marrying of old and new the organisation is so keen to promote.
Anybody of any age and any physique can enjoy and either be socially involved or be competitively involved in.
And Ned London says the sport has come a long way in modernising its approach.
Throwing the white stockings away was another good thing. I'm going to get shot for this. I'm going to get shot for this.
Celebrations will continue throughout the year.
For the people of Port Stephens, it's difficult to comprehend that someone would want to kill one of these majestic giants of the deep. Here, many live and breathe humpback whales. In fact, they form the backbone of the tourism industry.
Port Stephens has about 1.1 million visitors per year and 1.1 million day trippers, but our favourite tourists are the humpback whale.
So last week's news that Japanese hunters are planning to increase the number of whales they slaughter for what they call scientific purposes came as a shock. They also want to be allowed to kill humpbacks in Australian waters, which have been protected since the mid-60s.
The whole of Port Stephens is horrified that they're thinking to do that. It doesn't really comprehend in Australia that we would do that to animals like that.
According to Whale Watch cruise operators, even Japanese tourists are mortified.
We also have a work experience girl from Japan on our boat at the moment, and she's horrified. They really don't see it in the media over there and aren't really aware of what's going on. So it seems to be fairly covered up.
Port Stephens will urge its sister cities in Japan, Tateyama and Yugawara to lobby their governments to end the bloodshed.
We can't tell them what to do, and no sooner can they tell us what to do. But I think they'll hopefully respect that relationship and hear our plea.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
This vision was taken by animal liberationists involved in the raid and captures what protesters say is the appalling treatment of hens at the Pace Farm-owned hen home battery facility at Buchanan in the Hunter Valley.
I don't like groups of people going in there and turning the camera on, opening the doors up and showing the community, where their eggs are coming from.
Here the protesters release a hen which had become trapped on the edge of its cage, which is about the size of an A4 page.
Stress and being pushed too far, and so that's exactly what we saw, just numerous accounts of animal abuse and suffering, entrapment in cages, dead bodies that hens were laying their eggs on, which roll out into our cartons.
The activists are pushing for amendments to animal cruelty legislation, which are being considered, to be broadened to cover battery farm animals as well. The people from Pace Farm were approached for their side of the story today, but didn't return our calls. But in the next 2 weeks, they can expect another visit from Animal Liberation, although under much more legal circumstances.
One of our directors and an avian or bird expert veterinarian of our choice, and the RSPCA and the senior veterinarian for their farm, and the government will do a major inspection of the whole property within the next 10 days.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Whether he made the cut or not, Toronto's Trent Hawes will remember this selection carnival, scoring 3 tries for Northern in the Open Division at home.
It's good to score a try in front of the boys in the crowd.
But whether it was exhaustion or nerves, Northern lost its attack, and in defence they were ripped apart by Southern's 5'8" Mick Picker. Southern strung together another 2 tries, going on to win by 10. Northern winger Simon Toofy from Hunter Sports High also made selectors take note, but it wasn't to be. He missed out on one of 20 spots to represent New South Wales in a national series.
That comprises mainly New South Wales combined high schools, Queensland state schools and ACT.
You couldn't help but feel the champion galloper knew he was leaving, pondering life away from Broadmeadow, a place where he's witnessed many sunrises. But this one was special for Fastnet Rock. It was in fact his last in Newcastle. The highly rated sprinter is tonight on a plane bound for England, his final career campaign. Tell us what a champion galloper takes overseas. I saw plenty of feed. What else does Will Fastnet take with him?
All of his ability. Yeah, just the horse, and he's the right horse for the trip, and he's had the perfect preparation back here.
Shannon Perry will accompany Fastnet Rock to British Club Newmarket, and for trainer Paul Perry, it's like 2 sons leaving home in what was an emotional farewell.
it's never easy. God, you're going over, it's near a 30-hour trip and everything's got to go right. And when you get there, you're racing some of the best in the world.
For the Perry family, though, it's a case of been there and done that. It'll be 2 years next month since Schwazir became the first Australian-trained horse to win at Royal Ascot. They're hoping Fastnet Rock will become the next.
He's won a couple of Group 1s and that, and he's raced the best, and he is a very good horse. And I suppose the way he's bred and all that sort of thing, he's probably a bit more regal than the other horse in that fashion.
Do you think he knows he's going overseas?
Oh, don't you worry, this horse here believes he's the true son of Danehill. Yeah, he knows he's going.
Paul will join his team next week, ready for their first race on June 14. With Fastnet Rock's domestic career now over, the stables feel somewhat empty at the Newcastle Jockey Club, a presence only a racing champion can provide.
The writing's been on the wall and the floor and the ceilings and pretty much all over the skate park at South Newcastle Beach for years. But finally, Council has come up with the Aerosol Art Agreement, a plan to cut down illegal graffiti but promote more structured and legal aerosol artworks.
The idea is just to try and manage the site a bit more effectively than we have in the past. We'll be asking aerosol artists not to paint on railings and light fittings and pavement, but to restrict their work to the wall.
Basically, the area will be divided into 3 sections, one for amateurs looking to hone their skills, another for senior artists, and one which will be reserved for community murals. Artists will also be asked to register with Council to use the site. At this stage, they're all for it.
But most of the people that come down here are here to do their art. They're not so inclined to see just drop tags everywhere. That was the cool part about being here. We have somewhere to go to.
But not everyone's convinced.
At the end of the day, it is crime and we're condoning it. We don't want graffiti in the city. It brings the city down to a level. It's intimidating to a lot of people, and I want a good, clean city.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
An initial sign that 2 of the buildings on the southern side of the disused steelworks are ready for their return to active service. The Regional Land Management Corporation, as the site's landlord, wants the Information Technology Building, with its 4,000 square metres of office and computer mainframe space, plus the neighbouring quality control laboratories, to lead the industrial revival of the Mayfield North site.
By offering the buildings now, it's about trying to attract new industries to the site that are going to take advantage of the other attributes of the site. So it's got good deep water frontage in this area, good road and rail, and it's close to the CBD.
It comes with the next stage of on-site work set to begin after securing money in the state budget.
We've got around $12 million in the program for the next 12 months to get on with the first stage of the remediation. That's part of about a $110 million program of remediating the site, and that's all about, again, making the site suitable for the next round of industry.
That includes the 1.4 kilometre long, 34 metre deep below ground wall to stop the future spread of pollution. 5 companies have been shortlisted to tender for the project. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's a tale of everyday people facing one of life's toughest tests. 6 strangers from diverse walks of life are suddenly thrown together in a radical plot to salvage their financial fortunes. And so the fun begins. Entirely produced in Newcastle, there's no big budget or special effects, but, says creator Gerald Lawson, that's just the point.
I just thought it's possible to put together a good story about ordinary people that has an impact.
So how does a gynaecologist become a movie maker? That's a story in itself.
It ain't easy. There's a lot of elements and in most cases a lot of money. We managed to take a whole lot of shortcuts without, I believe, jeopardising the film.
Little Lies will begin its commercial season tonight with a charity screening. It runs from tomorrow at Newcastle's Showcase and the Raymond Terrace cinemas. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.